Hello, my name is Dinah Trout, and I am the co-founder and chief mission officer at HealthAid. We make a very delicious, best-in-class fermented food called kombucha, and I hope you get a chance to try it. We're gonna send Feast some, so maybe you'll get your hands on some, and if you do, I hope you love it. But today, the purpose of this video is to be a train the trainer. I understand the group listening to this video is going to be facilitating the workshops with all of the Feast members that are coming in to learn about nutrition and wellness. And as you may know, in 2022, we added a couple slides on gut health. They're very high level, and the slides themselves are I think a perfect entry point for anybody who's unaware about gut health to learn about gut health. So that's good. But as I was working with Feast, I learned that as trainers, you're interested in more than just the high level. So, and it's helpful to know as well in case people have questions. So that's what I'm here to do with this video, is give you a bit more detail about gut health and what you should know as a trainer, and even just a human being in this earth, because gut health is so very important to every aspect of our health. So first, let me just describe to you, what do I mean by gut health? Gut health essentially is another way of talking about the microbiome. The microbiome is essentially an aggregate of all the bacteria, yeasts, and enzymes that live on our body. And most of the microbiome on our body lives in our gut. It's like more than 75%. Although there is bacteria, yeast, and enzymes on our skin, in our genital area, in our mouth. We have microbiomes in many different areas of our body, but the gut is the most prominent and most important. Here, trillions of microbes live. Now, I know that we think about bacteria probably as a bad thing, right? Because bad bacteria can make us sick. But it's very important to know that we have come a very long way to learn that not all bacteria are bad. In fact, some are very good and essential for us to live. And so we cannot just think of bacteria as bad. We must start to think of some bacteria as bad and some as good. And the ones in your microbiome are thought to be good. You should have trillions, more than there are stars in the Milky Way, in your gut. And that's a pretty cool fact to share in your classes. What we know is that a healthy microbiome is tied to so many things: better sleep, better digestion, better immunity, stronger ability to fight infection, lower inflammation. And just as a side note, many diseases are inflammatory, like cardiovascular disease, diabetes. So the fact that your microbiome is so heavily linked to low inflammation means it's linked to cardiovascular disease and diabetes as well. So your microbiome is tied to immunity, energy, metabolism, how your skin looks, how your hair looks, what your mood is, how well you sleep, not just digestion. It's basically connected to everything, and it's being called now by scientists the center of our health. If our microbiome is off, almost any part of your body can be feeling the pains of that. We know that a strong microbiome, a healthy microbiome, is tied to having an abundance of bacteria and yeasts. So that means more bacteria and yeasts, better in your gut. And we also know that having too few bacteria and yeast is tied to bad outcomes. So another thing we know is low bacteria and yeast is bad. So low is bad, high is good. So anything that's going to increase the bacteria and microbes in your gut, it's a good thing. It's going to impact all aspects of your health. When we think about these bacteria, it's important that you know, I'm going to share with you basically, one, what can we do to drive more bacteria into our gut? And then two, how you know if your gut is off, if your microbiome is off. So first, what are the things you can do to drive more bacteria and microbes into your gut? Well, basically, I see four main things. One, eat more fruits and vegetables and legumes and beans. Fruits, vegetables, legumes, and beans have fiber that our body actually can't digest very well, but these microbes digest. And it's when they digest this food that they can replicate and become more abundant. So the more you eat fruits and vegetables, the more bacteria you will attract and grow. And that's a good thing. The more microbes, not just bacteria. And so again, more is good in the gut. So fruits and vegetables, fibrous vegetables and fruits. So things like broccoli and kale and sweet potato and potato, banana, things that are like starchy and have a lot of fiber that are plants are going to be really good for your gut. So that's number one. Number two is eat fermented foods. Fermented foods are things like kombucha, which I mentioned, we make one, Health Aid. But it's not just kombucha. Yogurt, kimchi, kefir or kefir. You can now buy fermented pickles. Not all pickles are fermented, so you want to get the real ones that are refrigerated and say that they're fermented on there. But these are all things, sauerkraut, kimchi. These are examples of fermented foods, and you can buy them at the store. You can make them at home. You can learn how to make them at home for not too expensive at all. And then also you can get them at things like the farmer's market and local markets. It's pretty much everywhere now. But fermented foods are another great way to drive your microbiome. And the way that fermented foods do that is by also creating food for those bacteria in your gut so that more replicate and become abundant. The third way, I mentioned there's four ways. So one is fruits and vegetables, lots of them. Number two is fermented foods. Number three is to avoid too much alcohol. So alcohol is a toxin to the microbiome, and it only becomes toxic when you have too much. So a little bit is actually okay. Studies show that when you have more than two servings of alcohol in a row for 2 days in a row is when it starts to wreak havoc on your gut. So it's not that all alcohol at all amounts is bad. It's more excess alcohol appears to reduce the amount of bacteria in our gut. So again, you may find that you have too much wine one night and you don't have a great sleep. Well, a big reason for that is that most of your circadian proteins are the ones that tell your brain when it's time to sleep and when it's time to wake up. Most of those exist in your gut. So if the microbiome is unhealthy or it's feeling like it's being attacked, which is what happens when you have too much alcohol, the circadian proteins will start to send the wrong messages to your brain. So basically, we want to avoid excess alcohol as the third way to keep an abundant microbiome. And then last but not least, the fourth way is to take antibiotics only when necessary. So it is estimated by the CDC that more than 50% of the antibiotics we are prescribed are actually unnecessary. And it's very important that we and healthcare providers understand that there's benefit to taking antibiotics if we need them, right? Like my son had strep throat last week, and I'm very happy he had antibiotics to help him. So that was an example of where he needed the antibiotics. But if 50% are unnecessary, that means we are often taking antibiotics when we don't need them. And when perhaps our body would have fought it on its own, or a virus, for example, doesn't even respond to antibiotics. So the reason we want to only take them when necessary is that if you take antibiotics, you're basically wiping out your microbiome. Antibiotics kill the bad bacteria, right, which is causing the infection, but they also kill the good bacteria. And so you only want to take them if you actually need it, right? So it's important when you go to the doctor and you get the prescription that you ask the question, is this really necessary? Am I sure I need to take this? Because, you're doing yourself some harm by taking it as well. If you do have to take antibiotics, which again is sometimes necessary, make sure you're increasing your intake of fruits and vegetables and fermented foods, because those are going to help you. So 4 things just to review: Number 1, eat lots of fruits and vegetables. Number 2, fermented foods. Number 3, avoid excess alcohol. And number 4, only take antibiotics when necessary. That's the best way to basically support your gut. Now, next step is, how do you know if your gut is off? Well, there's many ways you can know. It may be showing up in your sleep. Your skin might be acting up. But the best way, I would say, the number 1 way to know is, are you going poop every day, at least once a day? And is it coming out as a solid stool, not too hard, not too soft? And does it come out easy? You don't have to push. And I know it's not always comfortable to talk about, defecation, but I think it's so important that we do, because that's the number 1 sign if our microbiome is off. So unfortunately, many people, in fact, it's estimated that more than 60% of people are not going to the bathroom every day. And that is not okay. That means your microbiome is off. So if you are one of these individuals that has no problem, you are going to the bathroom every day, no problem, like clockwork, your microbiome is probably pretty abundant and you're good. Keep doing what you're doing. It never hurts, of course, to eat more fruits and vegetables and fermented foods, but you're probably good. But if you're somebody who only goes once every couple days or 3 days, or it's really hard for you to go, or you find it comes out in little pellets, or you often have bloating or digestive issues, if you're one of these folks, I'm telling you, there's something in your microbiome that's missing, and you really need to think about it, because it's impacting all aspects of your health in ways that you may not realize. So that's basically the 101. I do want to share one other thing that I think you should know as facilitators, because there's a lot of talk in the media and in science right now about it. So you've probably heard about the microbiome. We talked about it today, right? The microbiome is the aggregate of all the bacteria, yeasts, and enzymes that live on our body. And we were talking about the gut microbiome today, so in the gut. But you may have heard of probiotics. You may have heard of prebiotics, and you may have heard of postbiotics. So I'm going to talk about those 3 really simply for you today. Probiotics are things we ingest, like usually a pill. It's basically bacteria or yeast that we ingest, hoping that it will go down into our gut and add to our microbiome. So when you buy a pill of a probiotic on the shelf, you take it and you hope that bacteria, lactobacillus, let's call it, goes into your belly and joins the party, if you will. That's probiotics. Now, if it does actually join the party, awesome. The problem is 90% of those pills don't even make it to your gut, because it's a very extreme environment. So taking a probiotic is more complicated and more difficult than I think the store has us sort of believing. You really need to know which probiotics work, which ones get into your belly, and actually make it there. Usually it's the refrigerated ones. Usually it's the ones that are more expensive. So, it's not as simple as just taking a pill. That said, fermented foods all have probiotics in them. And fermented foods, because it's a food and it's already an acidic environment, it always becomes available to your belly. So things like sauerkraut, yogurt, kombucha, kimchi, the things I mentioned before, those are all going to have probiotics in them, and those will all make it to your gut. So you're safe with food probiotics, but the pill ones, you never know. It's not going to hurt you, but it might be a waste of money. So that's probiotics. Prebiotics are food for the bacteria in your gut. So fruits and vegetables, fermented foods. Those are the 2 things that are food for your gut. And we already talked about the reason that those being the 2 things you need to eat more of to increase your microbiome. That's why, right? If you have food for these things, more will come. And so that's the idea behind prebiotics. And then postbiotics, that's an interesting thing you may be seeing on packaging and hearing about. So I want you to know what that is. All postbiotics are special compounds that the bacteria in your gut make when they eat food. So when the bacteria in your gut see you've just eaten a raspberry, yum, right? It loves fruits and vegetables. It's going to eat that raspberry and do all kinds of chemistry, and then it's going to pop out a compound. And that compound is called a postbiotic. Those compounds go on to turn on your brain to release serotonin, make you feel happy. Those compounds go to your inflammatory system to say, calm down. Let's bring your C reactive protein levels down. They go to your immunity and make sure that's in check. So these postbiotics are like miracle compounds. And they only come about when you have bacteria and when you have food for the bacteria. So that's why it's so important to have fruits and vegetables and fermented foods in your diet so that these postbiotics can go do their magic. Some foods are now putting postbiotics into the food, like the actual compound, that special compound, and those are pretty awesome. Okay, so I was told to do a 15-minute video. We're at 16 minutes. I truly hope this was helpful. And I thank you so much for introducing gut health to so many people. It's so important that we start to learn about this as an aspect of health that's so important. It is just as important as the heart, as the brain. And I'm very thankful that you're imparting that wisdom. And hopefully you learned something today from me. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for your work at Feast. Take care.